So, the Navy's in the news for suicides again, which, as a Navy veteran myself, doesn't surprise me. Which is awful to say, but that's the truth of the matter. I'm, seeing all these posts going around of, you're not alone, and here's a suicide prevention line, and, all of this, the usual stuff. The usual, suicide prevention training kind of stuff, which is great, but it's not doing anything. And this is a subject that's been bothering me for a long time. As a sexual assault victim, I went through a lot of the same mental health stuff, and they tell you when you file the report, you can go to medical. You, restricted or unrestricted, you can go to medical, which is great, but I had no idea why I would want to go to medical. And I always had this vague, theory that I would go to therapy after my second deployment, but I didn't know what for. I knew I didn't feel right, but I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how trauma would impact my brain, because no one told me. No one gave me a list of things to look out for. And that's, I think, what we need when we're dealing with suicide, when we're dealing with mental health, when we're dealing with trauma. We need to paint a picture for people of what kinds of things to look out for, what kinds of things they might want to go to medical for. We need to give people the words to use, and that's something we don't do. And we say talk about mental health, we say normalize mental health, but we don't actually do it. All we say is, ask for help, which is not normalizing. And that it bothers me, because it's not addressing anything. It's not getting, in the trenches, which is what this takes. It's what this needs. So instead of the usual suicide prevention stuff of, telling you guys are not alone, I'm going to tell you what I went through. Because telling you you're not alone is meaningless unless you believe me, unless you know where I stand and where I have stood. Because that's what shows you that you're not alone. And that's what will show you what path to take. So, and there's so many different places to start. There's the panic attacks. I could talk about how, because I'm not a morning person, from about an hour after my alarm went off, when my brain fully kicked online, I would just be in a panic attack. Just fight or flight all day till I went to sleep. I could talk about how I was sleeping at least 12 hours on my second deployment. If I wasn't actively working, actively doing maintenance, actively on watch, I was dead asleep. I wasn't eating because I was dealing with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Because I didn't know that my mental health and my physical health were so tied together that when my mental health starts to go, my guts will start to go as well. So I couldn't eat. I would try and my stomach would knot up, or I'd have diarrhea, or I'd puke. I didn't know that was normal for dealing with mental health stuff. So I had no idea it was related, so why would I go to medical for that? Just for, what were they going to do, give me Pepto-Bismol? I'm not wasting my own time with that. Because I didn't know what kinds of things I was dealing with. I could talk about how I would get just furiously angry anytime a man stood behind me, because I was assaulted from behind. And even men I trusted, men I'd worked with for years, men that were not capable of being violent, men that couldn't even raise their voices. I was terrified. They were threats to me. They were all threats, every single one of them. And so I had to react with anger, because I didn't realize I was dealing with so much fear. And if you aren't used to expressing fear, if you aren't used to expressing shame or guilt or disappointment, it comes out as anger. So I was pissed. I was so angry all of the time. And it just escalated. Because for my entire life I'd been dealing with trauma, and I didn't know that, and I didn't know what kinds of things I was dealing with, so I was just angry all the time. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. People wouldn't want to talk to me. There was no telling how I'd react to stuff. I'd scared myself. And it was really, really terrible to go through. But I didn't know that that was a mental health thing. I didn't know that that's the kind of thing you'd take to medical. I mean, why would I take that to medical? It didn't make sense to me. Oh geez, there's so many things. We could talk about how I felt weak for reacting to my trauma. I never blamed myself. I'm very lucky in that I never blamed myself for the assaults, which I'm really lucky because a lot of women do. Not just women are victims, a lot of men, actually men especially, tend to blame themselves for being assaulted, for being raped, for being violated like that. But I'm lucky, I never did. And that's probably one of the few saving graces I had in this situation. But I blamed myself for how I reacted. I blamed myself for reacting, that I was weak for reacting, that I couldn't just shake it off, that I couldn't just be a strong sailor or whatever. Because the thing that gets me about mental health, the thing that gets a lot of people is that it's not rational. It doesn't make sense. Your brain is trying to protect you. It's really terrible at it. It's really terrible because, like, panic attacks are not helpful, but that's your brain's method of trying to protect you. It's kicking you into fight or flight because it's like, oh shit, there's a lion, it's gonna eat me. Let's not get eaten by a lion. But the lion could be a coworker who's never actually done anything. The lion could be the mess decks. I couldn't go on the mess decks. My last month on the boat, I literally would, like, walk out of the ladder wall into the mess decks and just turn around and go right back. Couldn't do it. Too many people, too many noises, too many just men, just too much. Everything was just too much. It was all just too much. And that's, again, not something that I was like, are you gonna go to medical because you can't walk onto the mess decks? I'm like, what kind of weak, pathetic shit is that? Because that's what I was telling myself, because that's what I believed, because I didn't know that kind of stuff is really normal when you're dealing with trauma. I thought about my trauma every second of every day, obsessively. Like, I could not get it out of my head. That's very normal when you're dealing with trauma. That's a pretty typical thing to go to medical about, because you can't live like that. It's not healthy to live like that, because you're not processing it if you're obsessing over it. And that's the kind of stuff that leads people to, I mean, if I'd had the option, I probably never would have left birthing. I never would have eaten. I never would have spoken to people. All I would have done is slept. Because in my rack was the only time I ever felt truly safe. It was really bad. But I didn't know that that's what I was dealing with. I didn't have the words to describe what I was dealing with. So when I started self-harming, and on some levels, just like, okay, this is especially double not bad. On top of everything else, this is like the really terrible icing on this really terrible cake. Something's not right. But I couldn't say I was self-harming. So what I did when I went into the psychologist's office finally was I called it the clenchy fist thing. I even, like, wrote it down in my journal because I would just dig my nails, and I've always had, long nails. You can see them here. Dig my nails into my palms as hard as I could. And it hurt. And it hurt a lot. And I'm a total wimp. I don't like pain. Don't like pain. For me, it wasn't about the pain. For me, it was about control. Because I couldn't control anything that was going on. I couldn't control my mind. I couldn't control the people around me. I was in a really, really unsafe environment because my division was messed up. My boat has a really bad reputation. We had a suicide on my second deployment a couple weeks after I left. And I wasn't safe. And all I could control was just how it felt. I could control the pain. I could control when it was there. I could control how hard it was, how sharp the pain was. That's all I could do. And that's not good. Like, if you're doing that, even if you don't have the words to call it self-harm, go to medical. Tell them, just describe it. Tell them that you need a little bit of guidance in dealing with it. And the thing is, I didn't know what therapy could do. So not only did I not know what I was dealing with, I didn't know what the purpose was in going to medical. Like, I don't know, what was I going to do? Get given ibuprofen? I mean, we've all had our experience with the Navy medical. So I don't need to hear your horror stories because I've lived them. It took 3 years to get my pinched nerve in the shoulder diagnosed. 3 years of pain and misery. So been there, done that, So I didn't know what therapy could do. But that's not a good reason not to go to medical. Because if you've never heard of CBT, if you've never heard of DBT, if you've never heard of Wellbutrin or methylphenidate, if you don't know what any of those things are, that's not an indicator that they don't work. It's just an indicator that you haven't been exposed to that yet. Because if I thought, I could go in now knowing nothing and be okay, that would be a much better place to stand than where I was thinking that therapy couldn't do anything for me because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it could do. I didn't know really any of it existed. And so someone's not going to go get help if they don't think they have options. So it's not just, telling people they're not alone. It's not just telling people their resources. It's telling people what those resources are. It's breaking them down. It's giving them baby step checklists to get from point A to point B. Because when you're that far into it, you don't want to think about more things. You don't want to try new things. You don't want to take a risk on medical listening. You don't even know what to say if medical does listen. That's what we need. We need to talk about what we're experiencing, the people that do have the words. Unfortunately, I don't want to put this shit on you, but I kind of have to. We have to use our words for other people. We have to use our voices. That's what it means to use your voices. And it's hard and it's shitty, and I've taken like 6 takes of this video, and it's not easy. None of it's easy. Writing about it's not easy. Talking about it's not easy. And people are going to keep dying until we do. So I'm going to leave you with that. Talk about what you're dealing with. Especially as a leader, you don't have a choice. You do not have a choice. Put your rank on. Get your shit taken care of. Help your juniors. Because sometimes you might be the only one available. And people are going to keep dying until we get our shit figured out. And I don't want to hear about more suicides. I don't want to hear about more of this. We don't need more of this.